I'm Roniel,
I'm DaRon.
and sorry everybody for my lighting. I always have the shittiest lighting ever, but it's okay. It's okay. Deal. You guys have to deal with my shitty lighting. I know people that have worse lighting than myself, but today, I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna fix that. I promise that. I promise that. I'm gonna fix it.
Someone who
But
lives in a cave, maybe.
yeah, hey, I'm a caveman. Do you see? I mean, your beard is crazier, but mine's always
Ha!
sharp. It's never actually together. At least you seem to have yours lined up, but mine's always look kind of rough. Look like I'm going through a phase. But I'm gonna get it together. We get it
Starting
together.
to hit
But
puberty, it's coming in a little, you know?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I always don't have this part. I remember I didn't have this part, and then it was like one here, and then this was like nothing here, and I was just like, why? Why does God keep like doing this to me? Like He doesn't want me to become a full man. I don't know. You know, I am I am literally like I just sit around and be thinking of those things. The most boringest things. But neither here nor there. But you seem to have a great beard. I don't know how you do it, but maybe one day I can work that in. But it's probably going to take a long time. Do your beard actually grow out really long?
I don't know, I've never had the wherewithal to do I have a lot of hair, so it
Mm.
gets really hot, so I try to keep it light and breezy.
So if you had a long beard, I don't think it would be good for you knowing how you look.
No, no. That's true. You're right. I would not look good. I would
And
get in trouble. I have
I,
enough
I,
trouble as is.
do people literally get you mixed up with knowing that you're a Latino or and Native American? Do people get you mixed up that you may be Arabic or
Yeah.
yeah,
All the time.
that's that's crazy. I mean, is there many people that are Latino that look that way?
I think people who aren't in the southwestern United States seem to confuse a lot of uh, Mexicanos, mestizos, things like that, as being Arab because our skin tone, I guess, and many of us do have the beard and especially the Mexicans love their mustaches, but the big thick mustache, that's what it
Yeah.
seems like.
All right, you guys and your mustaches.
We don't have that little baby thing like some people here.
Hey, hey, he always talks about the baby things. How about my wrists? I got
Yeah,
little baby wrists.
that's
You
true.
know,
That's true.
I'm working on strengthening them by doing the exercises, the forearm exercises that we
That's
do.
good.
But it hurts. I mean, you could use the vice gripper things, I guess, but they don't never really help. I heard people say that may help the wrist, but it normally when I'm doing those exercises, it helps. But anyway,
I
enough of. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm actually surprised working the dumbbells doesn't help you.
Well, okay, just really quickly, the dumbbells. What they do is they tweak my wrist, so I have to wear the
Oh, you
wrist
put a
wraps.
brace on? Oh
Yeah,
my
I had to
goodness.
because as you know, I have weak shoulders and I have baby ass wrists. All right. And for anybody that knows me, don't you ever say baby wrist with me. But I have these weak wrists, which I don't understand. Everything else is big, but this part is just like, just I don't get it. Even my what you call it? I'm losing it right now. My calves, they're
Yeah.
small. I don't get it. Like I guess they'll say most people say that those are like runners calves where you can run very fast, and people with bigger calves usually can't run very fast, but I guess they can you know do better squats or heavy loads. But in this particular case, like that doesn't help. It tweaks my wrist, so I have to change up the exercise that works for me. Which is why I say most trainers need to understand how to train people because everything that works for them don't work for everybody else
Right.
because everybody's body types are different. So whatever may work for him doesn't work for me. So I have to tweak different things and exercises to get a better feeling, and it really doesn't help. So what we do is we instead of doing the curls that way, we turn it around with the straight
Ah,
bar curl,
yes, right.
and we do it this way. But either way, it helps. I've gotten better.
I think one of the more recent trends as a lot of these development teams get more and more acclimated to the mobile world, they start to complain about using jailbroken or rooted devices, whatever you want to call it, a lot more. And much of the basis of this, of course, is, oh, yes, but no one else would have seen that. In a standard environment, you wouldn't have seen this data. You wouldn't have been able to access these files on the mobile device. You wouldn't have been able to put your certificates on the mobile device. So they wouldn't have been accepted, and you couldn't have done the man in the middle and all that other kind of stuff. Those are some of the complaints I've seen and heard. Does that marry up with your experience?
Yeah, definitely. That's always been the thing, especially when, for instance, when you're doing things that are IoT devices that use Android, they say the same thing. And I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's still one of those parts that you should test, but that doesn't mean the severity may be the same. And what people don't understand is severity is subjective to the test and the tester and who's testing the system. It could be the system, the specification, whatever it may be. It's going to be subjective. You may think something is a high. I may think something is a medium. It's all dependent on the person who's testing and their experiences. But you can't outbeat the CVSS score. So
Right.
it's something that people don't understand. But yes, that is definitely something I see all the time or hear about. And it's very nerve wracking, especially for testers who think that they should be calling these things out, especially things that are, oh, you don't have jailbroken protection or router protection and stuff like that. Then they get slapped down because the client's like, well, who cares?
Right. Yeah,
And
that is a dumb finding.
yeah, like if you had access or a jailbroken phone, it's fair game. Like it was already game over.
Right.
And there's some argument to that, but that's why I think that we should definitely change our approach because there's just too much pushback. There's more pushback than there is clients understanding and giving in to the fact that this may be an issue. But even some of the severity or findings that you find, it doesn't make sense because the solution to them does not fix the problem.
Right.
So
Okay, so I think to that point, a couple of things that at least come to mind for me is a lot of times people rely too heavily on the fact that the system is rooted for their attacks and for how they even set up and plan the test. One of the first things I always do is I grab the APK or IPA or what have you, and I immediately decompile it right off the bat. That's the beauty of mobile assessments is you have the files. The same is true if you were working on an application that you had to run locally, be it server side or client side or what have you. You are able to decompile it. So why wouldn't you? And I think the big thing there is after you decompile it, that's when you start structuring how you want to run your attacks. That's how you start structuring maybe some of the things you're going to look for and try on the actual system, be it through the interface or through something else. And then what I always do is I set up a malicious server. So I have a malicious server and then I configure a malicious DNS server, and the malicious DNS server does one thing and one thing only, and that is provide DNS responses pointing the application, the mobile application or what have you, to my malicious server. And all that malicious server does is work to do, it constructs various attacks. And the beauty of doing it this way is you can't complain about the technique. I don't need to root the phone or anything like that. And some of us purchase certificates that work on .com, certificates that work on .net, that work on .gov, and you can find certificate authorities that will let you buy these root certificates that are dangerous and that they shouldn't. And that makes it easy because now, unless they have certificate pinning where they've pinned it to a given certificate, which is an issue in and of itself. That is its own problem that we can talk about at some other date. But unless they have something like that, now I can have a man in the middle if I wanted to, or I could just leverage this malicious server and let that malicious server be the thing that's generating responses that muck up the client, or that takes in these responses from the client and then does whatever it's supposed to do with regard to the actual data. That's my preferred methodology, and that works well. But the other thing is, if I can get your mobile client to give me access to the file system such that I can push files down onto the mobile phone, that becomes incredibly beneficial because now I actually get a foothold on the mobile device and I don't need to root it. I mean, we saw in a previous episode where we were looking at a mobile phone that had been compromised, they didn't root the phone. They didn't need to root the phone. They could still go through and see all of her messages, all of her email, all of her SMS. They had access to her bank data and they ran wild on her phone. And that's something else that people forget is if nothing else, you can have a mobile application that you make of your own that effectively bootstraps their application. And then it doesn't need to be jailbroken because I'm in control of them since I'm running their client myself. So you have different options here, is the real point. Rooting the device, can you do it? Yeah, sure, why not? But at the end of the day, I can go through and do digital forensics on that phone without jailbreaking or rooting the phone and find, okay, you have sensitive data in these files, in memory, in these locations. You're storing passwords in an insecure way. And I can find that also in the source code, but we do that verification by actually touching the device, and all of that can occur in a way that they can't complain about, especially if I manage to drop onto the mobile phone, because now we're doing like what we saw with that particular episode where they have control over everything and they just do what they want to do on the system.
Okay, so what about the factor since you said something about digital forensics? Not everybody can do digital forensics, as we talked about in a previous episode or episode before. So definitely go check that out. But the client will sometimes say, especially if you're doing those things and don't have to root the phone, if you have the phone, they complain about that as well.
Right. Yes. Oh, well, you had physical access. But the problem with that is the same problem that you have with, say, a laptop. There is an extreme expectation that the user is going to be walking around with this device. Phones get stolen all the time, all of the time. Laptops get stolen all of the time. This isn't a desktop. This isn't a server. It's not sitting in a rack somewhere. It's not sitting in your home somewhere. It's moving around. You lose it, someone picks it up. They may or may not be a good person. If they're not a good person, now you have a problem. If they are a good person, maybe they'll return it back to you, but maybe they won't because they can't get a hold of you or they make assumptions. It's this goes actually to a different issue entirely because one of the things with the malicious DNS server is what we're really simulating is if you had your mobile phone and you managed to go on a malicious network. And we had a finding where a a company was using AES, but they were doing so in an insecure manner. And so I simulated someone who was able to sniff that traffic. Either they were on that same network or they were a malicious party through which that mobile phone was transmitting the data. It didn't really matter, but it meant that we were able to collect up enough data to then break the encryption and compromise the system. We were able to actually compromise the mobile device, and then we were able to attack the mobile uh, application server because we had been able to decrypt everything, because we'd figured out what the AES key was that they were using, et cetera, et cetera. The point being, while you will hear people complain about physical access, that is potentially a good excuse for a server or workstation application. It depends with regard to a workstation because if it's in a public area, it's in a public area. But definitely for a server that's behind a locked door and minimal access, et cetera, et cetera. That is not the case for a mobile device. If you're crying foul about physical access on a mobile device, you're grasping at straws, at least in my opinion.
No, I agree. That's why I say sometimes people who are doing security that we've seen that are supposed to be security people, they don't understand the ramification of these things, and they believe, oh, if you have this and that and blah blah blah. And that's what I say. With even if you had broken his phone, the whole idea to me behind the jailbroken device is to show that there is sensitive data there, and that if somehow the attacker gets the phone, there's ways that he can get that sensitive data, which is why it just blows my mind that they're thinking about the severity and they're arguing about severity more than they're thinking about the data that's stored on their device. Oh, and if you're able to get this and you have this, but you have sensitive data on your device. If the attacker gets the phone, then they get the data. And like you said, you don't have to root the device to get the data, but you can root the device if you want to, if they don't know how to do forensics, but you don't have to. So why aren't we focusing on the fact that you have sensitive data there and trying to fix that problem in case that happens? So you have, some type of recovery, disaster recovery in case something happened. But we're focusing on, oh, we so what? We have that there. There's nothing we can do about it. And then if you got the phone, and it's just that doesn't make any sense. Why are we not focusing on the issue at hand, but we're focusing on the fact that I have the device?
That's true. And to that point, one of the things that you'll hear from a lot of these software developers is, okay, what do I do? How do I protect this sensitive data? And the answer is simply you encrypt it. And then they say, of course, well, how do I get the key? And the answer to that is, of course, the key store. And this goes to a fundamental issue with any system, be it a, a desktop application, a mobile phone application, or what have you. If the key store gets compromised, you have bigger issues. Because you'll hear people say, oh, but you can extract the data from the key store. And they do so in a way that's not actually accurate. But that's the claim they'll make. In older mobile phones running older operating systems, yes, there were exploits and it was easy to pull the key store for some other application. In more modern ones, it's a little more difficult. Can it be done? Yes, we do that in forensics. We do that in some other stuff, but we do that in forensics. What they do not understand, though, is, and this is why they complain about the use of jailbroken devices, et cetera, et cetera. There comes a point where the system is so compromised, there's nothing you can do about it. You are hosed, the game is over. This, like I said, this is what they're keying in on when they complain, oh, well, you saw this because you used a jailbroken device. Now, in those cases, my answer is no, that's not accurate. I could have grabbed this data in numerous other ways. I have the forensics background to actually, number one, back that up, and number two, have that discussion and enumerate the many different ways that you can obtain this data in an unjailbroken or a non-rooted instance. But a lot of people don't. But if my attack relies on the system being jailbroken in order to dump all the data from the key store, again, something you used to be able to do, then yes, there's nothing that can be done. And to exactly what you're saying, what's the point in running that test then?
Yeah, it makes no sense, and that's why I say then if you have OWASP and all these other people like MITRE saying do such and such, but the client is saying, oh, that doesn't matter, and you're like, but they're saying this is the standard that we should be looking at when we're doing testing, but you're saying it doesn't matter, then what's the point? We might as well not use jailbroken devices at all. Because as you said, it's a lot of, if you look at the application permissions that we have on most of these applications, they have extensive permissions. Like they have permission they don't even need. So thinking about that, going through and say, oh, okay, you saying that I can't access your file. Well, what's stopping me from accessing the file through your application? Since I already have permission to write and to read. What's stopping me from creating my own application, injecting it or side channeling it on there and doing some type of side channel attack to get the data from that I already the application already has access to, and I can intercommunicate with those. So
Right.
it's it's so many ways to do that that even myself I didn't think about that in ways until Deron had brought that up. And I thought it was very interesting. I started really rethinking the way I'm doing testing because so many clients are coming back with that excuse, for certain findings, like, oh yeah, you already have that. So why do we do? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. The whole test is I do tests with an unjailbroken phone and a jailbroken. So that way I can see what I can see with it not being jailbroken and with it being jailbroken.
Right.
And that's why I don't understand why they fixate on one particular part when you're like, I'm telling you, hey, you have sensitive data here. Doesn't matter how I got it. The fact is
Right.
I can get it.
Right.
So what are we going to do about that? Because if I can get it, anybody else can get it,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be be a jailbroken device.
Right.
And I'm not the most forensic savviest person, but I do have some idea how I can get certain things. But that goes to what we said before. I'm not going to use my certain things that I have for other things. So,
Right.
but it just doesn't make any sense. And I think people need to rethink about how they do the assessments. There are so many other ways. And then when you really think about it, Ron, I mean, majority of the mobile applications are web applications. Like they're just web services.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
APIs, and you're interacting with them. So you're going to find those same, vulnerabilities there, and then you're going to find things you would try to access from the device side. So it's going to be a mixture of those things, and I've noticed that people who are doing mobile testing are not finding a lot of stuff because they're fixated on the jailbroken devices and what you can find on there. And then, like I said, you look at the assessment, and it's like, what the hell were you doing?
Right. Right. Yes. There are a lot of people who get stuck in that mode where they spend honestly waste all of this time trying to scour through the system to look for minutia, and that goes to a different problem, which is the insistence on enumerating all instances of a thing, all instances of a vulnerability, all instances of a finding. And that's not our role. That's never been penetration testing's role. That is security assessment at best, but even then, that's really vulnerability scanners' job, not a human's job. And vulnerability scanners miss a lot of stuff anyway. We've touched on that here and there in the past. But I think that, to exactly what you're saying, being able to go through and say, okay, I did this from a jailbroken and a non-jailbroken device perspective. I went to the jailbroken device just to, make sure I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's. But here's what I could do through an overly permissive application. And those are common. And it doesn't need to be the application that you're testing, which is exactly what you're talking about. You had that one system where they had installed different applications, and one of their applications had excessive permissions, and that allowed you to go through and go all over the file system.
Yep. Then I don't. They didn't even know about it. But
Hmm.
again, it just kind of opened my eyes that I didn't need to use a jailbroken device.
Right.
It's just the fact that when you're doing testing and mobile testing, they tell you need to do so and so, and I'm like, I really don't need it. With forwarding my DNS traffic, I don't really need to worry about certificate pinning. That gets around all of that. I with the application permissions and the things that you can do with it, I don't need to worry about using a jailbroken phone in that case. And then also with having the code,
Right.
you have a lot of things you need there. So a lot of the stuff for mobile device testing, just doesn't. It's irrelevant. Some of the things they want you to call out is just stupid, and it's fluffing up the report, which we don't want to do.
Right.
Okay, and if you want to call out certain issues and don't want to have an argument, DaRon had brought this up a while ago as well, is put as a best practice.
Right.
There's nothing to argue with about that. It may be something that you value, but you want the client to know, but it doesn't have to be something that we argue about severity because it's a best practice thing that they should be following. And then they can choose to do what they want. Another thing I wanted to bring up, DaRon, is something that was, I think, the misconception of how people look at mobile assessments is, oh, this attack doesn't work like it would work on a web application. So cross-site request forwarding doesn't work on mobile. You've never
Right.
seen that happen on a mobile assessment. I've heard so many people tell me, no, that doesn't work. That's not how that works. Or you do cross-site scripting on a mobile assessment, it's supposed to be a critical versus if it's on a web app, it's supposed to be a medium. People think it's low, it's a medium thing because it doesn't seem like it's very impactful, but they don't even understand the impact. Look what you
Right.
can do with these things.
Right. Well, they also don't understand I don't need the mobile device to point you to the vulnerable server. I can sit there and just send you straight to it. Boom, away it goes. Which goes to your point that these mobile applications are web views.
Mm-hmm. Like they're just a web service. It's the same as the web application, which is why when you find something on the particular on the web app, it's more likely going to be on the mobile as well because they're using the same stuff, same service, same backend. It just their code base may be a little bit different than what it is on the web, but pretty much it's the same shit. So I just don't understand how people are missing these things. Now, not everybody's skill set is the same, but if you're able to do application testing, you should be able to do this and find the same thing you found on the web app on a mobile. Which is why when you do assessments or we find so many different vulnerabilities, and people you look at other people's assessment and it's like, what were you doing? Like, I don't understand it. Why did you treat this different than anything else?
Right. This actually, I have a really fun and funny example from a recent test I had. This particular mobile application was much more web-like than some of the other ones I've done. Some are very much not just a dumb browser, but this one was a very, very dumb browser, but it was also tied to a web server. So what it would do is it hits the main website, you log in, and then as part of that authentication process, it kicks over to a location that has the mobile client download a zip file. That zip file, it then unpacks, and all it is it's a whole bunch of TypeScript. And, of course, they were vulnerable to template injection, which was great because what that meant was to exactly what we were talking about, many different ways to compromise the phone so you can see everything. I was able to pull all of the data from the hard drive. I say hard drive, I'm old. All of the data from from the mobile phone's memory, from the mobile phone's, I mean, SD card, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
Uh,
their storage. Yeah.
yeah, from the file system because of the template injection, and because this thing wound up creating a shadow web server kind of effect that then the client kicked over to and was running through, and that web server then, after it handled the request, would ship it off to the actual endpoint. So back to the server in the sky, the mobile application server, and that was a way for me to compromise the whole phone. I was able to run whatever I wanted. I was able to see whatever I wanted. I could write whatever I wanted. And I wound up getting a reverse shell, obviously, on the mobile device. And away I went. It was very simple. It was very clean. It was very elegant. And that's the thing people forget is in any environment, you are only as secure as the weakest link. People have so many applications. This is why we talked before, and I've said I don't have much on my phones. In fact, I didn't even have a smartphone until semi recently because all it takes is one vulnerable application, and now your phone, the entire phone gets hosed. So, to your point, we can make a malicious application, malicious for our testing purposes. We can make one that bootstraps whatever it is we're after. And now we have access to all of the memory and everything else. We can do so many different things. It's not funny. It's really all Frida is doing anyway, is bootstrapping. But,
Yeah, that's all it does.
mm-hmm.
Hooks right into the app.
That's exactly right. You can do your own. It's actually very simple. It's very simple, and you can do it so you don't need to be jailbroken and cause mayhem because you don't need to.
You sure they won't call foul and bootstrapping your own? You know, hookers has been around all the time. Point hookers. They've been around for a long time, so you can always hook in and debug applications. Some applications are not debuggable, but you can still get around that if you understand how the kernel and everything works and the things you can call. So it all depends, but you know, either way, like I say, we need to rethink the way we do assessments and especially mobile assessments and not get boggled down or make it more complex than what it is. It's not that complex. It's pretty simple. But we also need to stop fluffing up shit and making things, that are or calling out things that don't make sense.
Right.
Let's change this. Let's do better. Let's make better mobile assessment and less client, maybe less client interaction than most people would like, where they actually understand defining, especially developers. Not a lot of developers are not going to understand this shit, and it's not for them all the time to understand exactly what you're trying to describe, but to understand how to fix it.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so and that's the goal here. But either way, we're out of time. This is our time. I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more episodes like this one. Until the next time.
Have fun.